The stars burned cold and distant, their light a silent witness to the arrogance of empires. For 1,000 years the Galactic Dominion had ruled unchallenged, its borders stretching across 100 systems, its fleets an unstoppable force. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed civilizations, and enforced their will without question. To them, humanity was just another species to be catalogued, a young, fractured race barely capable of interstellar travel. A minor entry in the archives. A footnote. And that was their first mistake. The Dominion scouts had watched Earth for decades, studying our wars, our politics, our petty divisions. They saw a species too busy fighting itself to ever look outward with true ambition. So when their war machines descended upon our colonies, they expected surrender. They expected fear. They did not expect fire. The first attack came without warning, a Dominion dreadnought appearing over New Horizon, their demands broadcast on every frequency. Asterisk, lay down your arms. Submit to imperial rule. Resistance is death. Asterisk, the colony's governor, a grizzled veteran of the old Earth conflicts, sent back only 3 words before the transmission cut out. Asterisk, come and take. Asterisk. The Dominion laughed. Then they glassed the settlement. But humanity had been playing dead for a long time. Deep in the asteroid belts, hidden in the blind spots of their sensors, our ships had waited. Not the bulky, lumbering vessels the Dominion had seen in our records. No, these were something new. Fast, silent, ruthless. While the Empire celebrated their easy victory, our first strike tore through their supply lines like a knife through flesh. Supply depots exploded. Relay stations went dark. An entire battle group, caught unprepared, vanished without a trace. The Dominion High Command refused to believe it. Humans couldn't do this. Humans were weak, divided, fragile. Then the broadcast started. Not pleas for mercy. Not desperate negotiations. Just a single message, repeating on every captured Dominion channel, voice cracked with static but sharp as a blade. Asterisk, you thought we were prey. You were wrong. This is your only warning, retreat. Or learn why our history is written in blood. Asterisk. Somewhere in the void, the first human warships ignited their engines. Somewhere in the dark, the Empire's scouts finally realized the truth. They hadn't started a war. They had woken a monster. And it was hungry. The Dominion's High Command had gathered in the heart of their flagship, the air thick with tension. The holographic displays flickered, casting ghostly blue light across their faces, faces that had never known fear until now. Fleet Admiral Valus, a veteran of a dozen conquests, clenched his scaled fists as the reports poured in. Outposts destroyed. Patrols gone silent. Entire sectors slipping into darkness. This is impossible, hissed one of the junior commanders, his voice trembling. Humans don't have the technology. They don't have the coordination. Valus said nothing. He had seen the footage from New Horizon, not just the bombardment but what came after. The debris field should have been empty. Instead, the wreckage had moved. Hidden within the twisted metal were human ships, lying in wait like predators. And when the Dominion salvage teams moved in, those ships had struck. No warnings. No demands. Just slaughter. Back on Earth, the war councils were anything but silent. The old rivalries, nations, corporations, factions, had melted away in the face of extinction. For the first time in centuries, humanity spoke with one voice. And that voice was rage. In the underground bunkers of Geneva, a woman stood before a screen filled with flickering battle reports. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't a politician. She was a scientist, one of the minds behind the whisper drives, the engines that made human ships near invisible to Dominion sensors. Her hands shook as she traced the lines of destruction spreading across the star maps. They think we're weak because we fight each other, she muttered. But that's exactly what makes us dangerous. She was right. The Dominion had never faced an enemy like this. Their empire was built on order, discipline, absolute obedience. But humanity? Humanity thrived in chaos. Every broken rule, every desperate gamble, every insane plan that should never have worked, that was our history. And now it was their nightmare. Meanwhile, on the edge of contested space, a lone human frigate drifted in the dark. Its hull was scarred, its engines barely holding together. Inside, the crew moved like ghosts, their faces gaunt but their eyes burning. They had just hit a Dominion supply hub, leaving nothing but ashes behind. The captain, a man who had once been a merchant before the war took everything from him, stared at the star chart. His fingers hovered over a blinking signal, a distress call from another human outpost, one that hadn't gone silent yet. "We go here," he said, his voice rough. Not because it's smart. Not because we'll win. But because if we don't, who will? The crew didn't cheer. They didn't need to. They just nodded, tightened their straps, and prepared to jump. Somewhere in the void, the Dominion spies finally intercepted a human transmission. Not a military command. Not a strategy. Just a voice, whispering into the dark like a promise. You wanted a war. Now you'll see how we fight. And far away on a forgotten colony world, a child looked up at the sky and wondered when the stars would stop burning. The Dominion fleet arrived in the Epsilon system like a storm of steel and fire, their dreadnoughts blotting out the stars. This was no scouting force. This was annihilation made manifest. High Command had decreed it. Erase the human presence here, leave no survivors, send a message that rebellion was suicide. But the humans weren't running. Hidden in the asteroid fields, buried in the static of solar winds, their ships waited. Not the sleek, untested prototypes of the first strikes. These were warships forged in desperation, their hulls patched with scavenged Dominion plating, their weapons jury-rigged to hit twice as hard. The crews inside weren't soldiers. They were miners, engineers, refugees who had lost everything. And they had nothing left to lose. Aboard the Iron Will, Captain Riker gripped the command console until his knuckles turned white. The Dominion armada filled the view screen, an unstoppable tide. His crew was silent, their breath shallow. They all knew the odds. Then the comm crackled. A voice, young but steady, broke through. "This is Lieutenant Kara, Storm Chaser Squad. We're in position." Riker exhaled. Kara shouldn't have been here. None of them should have. She'd been a shuttle pilot before the war, ferrying tourists between Luna and Mars. Now she was leading a squadron of fighters loaded with stolen Dominion plasma charges. "Light 'em up," Riker said. The trap sprang. From the shadows of the system's gas giant, a swarm of human ships erupted, not at the dreadnoughts but at their escorts. Fast. Brutal. No grand speeches, no demands. Just kill shots to engines, point-blank railgun volleys into weak points. The Dominion formation shuddered, their flawless ranks thrown into chaos. On the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dawn, Admiral Valus watched in disbelief. This wasn't warfare. This was butchery. Human vessels rammed disabled Dominion cruisers, detonating their cores. Fighters weaved through flak screens too fast to track. "Focus fire." Valus roared. "Burn them all." But the humans kept coming. Somewhere in the chaos, Kara's fighter spiraled past a dying Dominion destroyer. Her targeting screen screamed at her, "Missile lock." She wrenched the controls, feeling the G's crush her into the seat. "Not today," she gasped and fired her last torpedo straight into a dreadnought's hangar bay. The explosion lit up the void. Back on Earth, the war room monitors flickered with live feeds from Epsilon. The scientists, the generals, the exhausted politicians, they all stood frozen. This was it. Either humanity's last stand, or the turning point. Then the feeds cut out. Static. Silence. In the darkness of the Iron Will's bridge, Riker stared at the blank screens. No signals. No comms. Just the distant glow of burning ships. "Did we?" someone whispered. Before Riker could answer, the proximity alarms howled. Something massive just exited warp. Not human. Not Dominion. The last thing the sensors showed before dying was a shape, vast, alien, and very, very old, unfolding itself into the battlefield. And then the stars went out. The silence on the Iron Will's bridge was thicker than the void outside. Every screen was dead. Every system offline. Even the emergency lights had flickered out, plunging them into absolute darkness. Riker could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, the ragged breathing of his crew the only proof they weren't alone in the abyss. Then, light. Not from their ship. Not from the burning Dominion wrecks. But from it. The thing that had arrived. It hung in space like a wound in reality, massive and wrong. Its surface shifted, fractal patterns twisting in ways that made Riker's eyes ache. This wasn't Dominion tech. This wasn't human tech. This was something older. Something that didn't belong here. A weak signal hissed through the dead comms. Kara's voice strained with static. "Captain, what the hell is that?" Before Riker could answer, the Dominion fleet, what was left of it, reacted. Their remaining ships lurched into motion, not attacking, not fleeing, but forming up in a defensive pattern around the Eternal Dawn. As if they were protecting it. Then the voice came. Not through speakers. Not through comms. It was inside their heads, scraping against their thoughts like broken glass. "Cease. The word wasn't in any language and yet they understood it. It carried weight, history, a threat older than civilizations. On Earth, every screen in the war room blared to life at once. The same shifting fractal filled the displays. The same voice echoed through every speaker in every city, on every ship, in every bunker. This conflict is terminated. The scientists scrambled, pulling up readings that made no sense. Energy spikes beyond anything recorded. Gravitational distortions where there shouldn't be any. And then the kicker. One of the analysts, her face pale, turned to the room. It's not just here. It's everywhere. Every system where humans and Dominion forces are engaged. These things are appearing at every battlefront. Silence. Then, from the back of the room, a whisper, "They're not here to stop the war." Pause. "They're here to judge it." Back in Epsilon, Riker's hands hovered over the dead controls. The thing out there hadn't moved. Hadn't attacked. It was just watching. Waiting. Kara's fighter drifted into view, her cockpit illuminated by the eerie light. Through the glass, Riker could see her mouth moving, screaming something he couldn't hear. Then the Eternal Dawn opened fire. Not on the humans. On it. Plasma beams the size of skyscrapers lanced toward the fractal entity, and vanished inches from its surface. No explosion. No impact. Just gone. The voice came again, colder this time. Error. And then the Eternal Dawn, the flagship of the Dominion Armada, the pride of their fleet, folded. Not exploded. Not torn apart. Folded. Like paper crumpled in an invisible fist, the massive warship twisted in on itself, screaming metal and dying crew crushed into a singularity no larger than a human fist. Then it was gone. The Dominion ships broke. No orders. No tactics. Just pure, animal panic as they spun and burned toward the nearest jump points. But the humans couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Because the thing, the judge, had turned. Toward them. Kara's voice finally broke through the static, shrill with terror. "Riker. It's scanning us. The transmission cut. The last thing Riker saw before the Iron Will S system surged back to life was the fractal entity pulsing, its light deepening to a bloody crimson. And then, across every human and Dominion channel, the voice spoke one final word. Decision. Before the stars themselves screamed. The Iron Will shuddered as power flooded back through its systems, screens flickering to life with garbled data. Riker gripped his console, his mouth dry. Outside, the fractal entity loomed, its crimson pulse throbbing like a heartbeat. Across the fleet, human ships hung frozen, waiting for judgment. Waiting for extinction. Then the voice spoke again. Assessment complete. The words vibrated through Riker's bones. He expected death. Annihilation. But instead, a transmission burst through from Earth. The war room was in chaos, voices overlapping. "Captain. It's not just here, it's everywhere. Every battlefront, every system. The Dominion forces, the feed cut, then reconnected. They're retreating." Riker's breath caught. On the view screen, Dominion ships were vanishing into warp, fleeing in every direction. But the fractal entity didn't pursue them. It stayed. Watching. Then without warning it moved. Not toward the humans. Not to attack. It drifted past the Iron Will, past the broken hulls of dead warships, until it hovered over the wreckage of the Eternal Dawn, or what was left of it. The space where the flagship had been was now a swirling vortex of darkness, a wound in reality. The voice echoed one last time. Conclusion, hierarchy inverted. New custodians designated. And then it was gone. No explosion. No fanfare. Just gone. Silence. Kara's fighter floated into view, her face pale through the cockpit glass. Did we just win? Riker didn't answer. Because the sensors were picking something up. Not Dominion. Not the entity. Something else. From the void where the Eternal Dawn had been, a signal blared, an old human frequency and used for decades. A distress call. But not just any distress call. The first one. The one sent from New Horizon when the Dominion attacked. The one that had started it all. Only, that was impossible. New Horizon was gone. Its people were dead. And yet the signal was there. Clear as day. Riker opened the channel. Static. Then. A voice, weak but unmistakable. The governor of New Horizon, the man who had told the Dominion to come and take. His last words. But not a repeat. Not a recording. They're not retreating. They're running. From you, from us. But, it's not over. It's waiting. And it's hungry, asterisk. The transmission cut. The vortex where the eternal dawn had been pulsed once. Then collapsed, leaving nothing behind. No answers. No explanations. Just a warning. And the stars, cold and silent as humanity, the new custodians, were left standing in the ashes of a war they didn't fully understand. Victorious, but not alone. And somewhere in the dark between galaxies, something stirred. The silence after the entity's disappearance stretched for weeks. Humanity held its breath, waiting for the next blow to fall. But the Dominion didn't return. Their remaining forces had fled beyond known space, leaving behind broken fleets and abandoned colonies. The war was over. We'd won. But at what cost? Riker stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Iron Will, staring at the stars. They looked different now. Not just points of light anymore, but watchers. The crew moved quietly behind him, their celebrations muted. Nobody knew how to process victory when it came wrapped in so many unanswered questions. On Earth, the rebuilding had already begun. Cities rose from rubble, ships returned from the front lines, and children played in streets that hadn't seen laughter in years. The woman who designed the whisper drives walked through her lab, her fingers trailing over blueprints for something new. Something better. She paused at a window, watching the sunset paint the sky in fire. The same color as the fractal entity's final pulse. Kara sat in her fighter's cockpit, grounded for repairs. She ran her hands over the controls, remembering the feel of battle, the terror of facing something beyond understanding. Her hands didn't shake anymore. She'd seen the abyss and it had seen her back. In the war room, the generals and scientists pored over the data from that final encounter. The vortex. The signal. The warning. They'd started calling it the echo, a ripple in time, a message from the past that shouldn't exist. Or maybe, a message from something else. Something that had been watching far longer than anyone realized. Riker turned from the window as his comm buzzed. A new contact on the edge of known space. Not Dominion. Not human. Just there. Waiting. He smiled, a tired, determined thing. Set a course, he said. Because humanity had never been good at leaving mysteries unsolved. We'd stared into the dark once and found the strength to fight. Now we'd do it again. Not as victims. Not as soldiers. But as custodians. The Iron Will's engines flared to life, carrying them toward whatever came next. Behind them, Earth shone blue and fragile in the vast night. Ahead, the stars burned with secrets yet to uncover. And somewhere in the infinite black between, something ancient and hungry stirred. And listened.